Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to An Imperfect Union. What's, what's happening? Okay, little technical things going on here, but we'll get things back here in a minute. Okay. Anyway, um, I seem to have stirred up somewhat of a hornet's nest on Facebook with a post that I put up and labeled it The Cowards of Uvalde. Needless to say, uh, some former law enforcement officers, families took uppance at the word coward. And, excuse me for one moment here. Okay. I just decided that I would pull it up uh, in the dictionary. And it actually has three meanings: a noun, a person who lacks the courage to do or endure dangerous or unpleasant things. They had run away, the cowards. Adjective. Number one, excessively afraid of pain or danger. Two, of an animal depicted with a tail between the hind legs. Now, when the law enforcement officers themselves tell you that we waited because we were in fear of our lives, I think that fits both the noun and the adjective. The most, well, I don't know, maybe it's my brashness, but the most surprising thing to me is that you have a lot to say, but when I ask the questions, no one wants to answer. See, and this app is very simple. You can put an emoji up in front of you or whatever. But don't be afraid to express your opinion if you disagree with me. Now, where are my guests tonight? Hmm. Uh, I guess maybe they're on colored people's time. But let's see. And there's Mr. Scott. I'm trying to see if I can. Okay. I see Mr. Scott is here. Mr. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, great, James, and yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm a little tired of things that have been happening,
Yeah.
and you know, this week I wanted to ask some really hard questions because you know my stance about defund the police, and as I said, it's not so much as defund the police as it is reform the police. Now, I put up some things as far as the Texas law enforcement is concerned. And number one was that they have no commitment, legally or civilly, to attack an individual that's barricaded. Also, as I said, legally or civically, but also you have 13 grown men that are waiting outside during this slaughter. Kids are calling into 911. So, Mr. Scott, if I have police that are too cowardly to do their job, what do you think is the responsibility of law enforcement?
Well, I'm gonna, answer that, James, with just what I've read about that Texas shooting is that the state of Texas has more law enforcement officers than anybody in this country.
Any,
Okay,
including California.
including California. They have more. They have from your Texas Rangers, all the big old 10-gallon hats and all this little stuff that they parade around in. Yeah, it's a shame what happened. I mean, that thing is. I feel for those people, and I, boy, and then they don't have any answers for you. And then they dummy up. They don't want to tell you what happened. They're just going to hide. They're going to go hiding, and they're supposed to be the tough, Texas Rangers. You used to watch that. You remember when they used to have a show on TV, Texas Rangers. They were supposed to be bad. They were bad folk.
Oh man, hey, come on, the Texas Rangers and the Pinkertons, if they got behind you, boy, you remember them good old cowboy days. Come on.
Sure. But, yeah, and I do. But oh boy, what is this girl? This girl has to go away right now. I can't deal with her. Let me get.
Good. I'll put you on mute for a minute. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I took care of that.
Uh,
So, but yeah, it's a very sad state of affairs, and to see their response, when they really start breaking this stuff down, and James, it's like these things we hear them, but then as they dive more into it, it gets worse. I mean, somebody's opening up doors. I mean,
the guy that finally engaged the suspect was in the barber shop when it happened. His
yeah,
wife called him.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah,
in the meantime,
yeah,
you got 19 grown men sworn to uphold the law, protect and serve, everything that goes with it.
sure, sure. And one guy can march into this school and have all of them cower in fear on the outside when they know that these children are in there and they need to be protected. I mean, you have to take these jobs serious. I mean, when you're responsible for somebody's kids, you're supposed to act, and you should be trained to do that. I mean, obviously, those are your
He's a
words.
police chief. It was the police chief that went in. It wasn't a peon. It wasn't a little patrolman off the street. This man is supposed to be efficient, if not proficient, in all avenues of law enforcement.
Yeah, all right. Well,
How do you how do you go into a fireman when he goes into a burning building carries a radio?
yeah, yeah,
How do you forget your radio?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a clear dereliction of duty. I mean, the whole thing is just a sad, sad deal that they couldn't figure it out. Like I say, one guy, I mean, just comes in and he's armed, but you got 20 other people there. Okay, it's on your side to snuff that out, and they stood outside and waited. What was it, for an hour or more?
They waited, well, at least 45 minutes, but the excuse was that we feared for our lives. Isn't this what police and law enforcement, isn't this what they're supposed to do? Isn't this protect and serve? I mean, you know, why am I calling 911 if, well, there's not enough of us here yet? Yet,
James,
yet,
I
yet,
mean,
yet, yet and still, now maybe it doesn't happen in your city, but I can see 6 patrol cars pull up after a homeless person down here.
yeah, yeah. And and what's even sadder about this, James, is if anything could be sadder, is this stuff is happening around our country. This stuff is happening, and they can't decide. Well, is it the rifles? Do we need to ban this? Do we need to? We have a mass confusion, and what's happened is people, with this pandemic, and then to say, I know we're going to get into talking about the mental health aspects, or at least the excuse that I say of mental health for allowing these kind of things to happen. But these things are happening, regularly. I mean, these things are coming up weekly. That there's mass shootings and there's people that, um, and they're just authorities really aren't getting a handle on this. I don't. Boy, that one in Texas, though, obviously, there's going to be scrutinized, and even though they don't want to talk, oh, they didn't hide behind a veil of silence. I believe these people are going to find out these people are going to get to the bottom of that, and I think some heads should roll for this.
Well, some, yeah, from everyone from the police chief down. Okay, and uh, I I know we're going to talk about mental health a little bit later on, but
Yeah, yeah,
let's talk about what I'm more concerned about is, like I said, the mindset. After reading this, after seeing what's taken place and how it's been blundered, do you think that we should have teachers armed in schools now?
I think that they should have resource officers in the school. I mean, I don't think anybody that doesn't know what they're doing should be playing around with a gun. I think they should have resource officers there. I mean, I don't think that it's going to get. I mean, are we just going to get back to the old cowboy days? Then everybody got strapped. Everybody's strapped on. You know,
Well,
is that the
well,
answer?
well. Wait a minute. Now there was a guard there. He walked away. Supposedly there was a back door left open, propped by a rock. Which, if the guard was there, why didn't he check the door?
Yeah.
Yeah, But then you have officers that tell you more or less, "I'm afraid to die." Well, look, and I know this is going to sound very, very callous, but can you think about maybe your cousin, your brother, when he was 18, 19 years old, and all of a sudden he found his ass out in the jungle somewhere? Do you think that we stood around waiting? Hey, Bill, we got to wait for George to come in. Maybe Ralph will be in a little bit, so we can't do this right now. I mean, yeah, this sounds, when you take a job where you have to carry a firearm, that tells you one thing about your job. You are a lethal. This is, like you said, this is not a toy. Everyone does not, supposedly you have people that are trained and have that ounce of courage. I mean, this was like the Wizard of Oz. All we had the Cowardly Lion. We had, I mean, who was missing? Dorothy. And Dorothy, and if you want to have a Dorothy, what about the lady that went in and got her two kids out?
Yeah. What about the guy? What about the father that said, "Look, give me the vest or give me the gun. I go in there and do this." You know, I mean that's how bad that guy. But to circle back a little bit on that, I don't know exactly where this location, Uvalde, Texas, is. It sounds like it's a rural type, a small town type thing. Does that have anything to do with this, James?
Well,
If you're in a rural outpost and you have a small town police force, is there some type of sleepy mentality in a small town that, oh, where this is impossible? That they are just totally, I don't know, numb
Mr.
to this
Scott,
possibility.
didn't they just have a shooting in the Kmart in Texas not a few months
Yeah,
ago?
yeah, they did. They did. And like I say, I'm seeing them on TV almost every day.
I mean, so
Every day.
so just it, there's a thing called prevention, and there's a thing called practice. When you're in a squad every day, you go in and you put in a certain amount of practice for tactics. You have to do live fire training so many times, so much a year, so many hours. But they can't issue you courage. They can train you all they want,
Yeah,
but they can't issue you courage.
we can't. I mean, basically, the bell rung and they froze. You know, the bell rung and they froze. I don't know how to put it more concise, um, but I do
But
want to follow this to see where they go with these derelict officers. What's going to happen with this? I mean, you can't bring these poor kids back. The families are grieving. I mean, it's a terrible tragedy.
once again, sounding very callous, I would have traded those 19 men for those 19 kids and two teachers.
Yeah, yeah,
Just my particular point of
yeah,
view. I'm not
yeah.
asking anybody to agree with me or not, but
Sure, 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 sure.
you know, I mean, but so coming full circle, now we have people in the Senate that are saying, well, okay, we need gun legislation. But Mr. Scott, I, maybe it's just me, but I never saw my grandfather go out hunting possum or coon with an AR-16. I mean, it, you know, he had the trusty old shotgun. I think he had the 22 little varmint gun. But he had, I think, no, we had a pump shotgun in the house. We did have a pump shotgun. So I see no need. I mean, uh, here are people that are actually equipped, better equipped than the young man, even though he did have 375 rounds or whatever it was. But with the proper training, proper equipment, there should have been no doubt. Everyone on the team has a job. You break through the door, you go right, you go left, boom, boom. And most police departments have a number of veterans employed. So, Mr. Scott, how are we supposed to have confidence in law enforcement the way it's currently regulated?
Well,
As, as, as I said, they have no liability, civil or criminal, for their actions.
yeah. But James, as you said earlier, why do we have to have these style of weapons available to the public? Why can anybody 18-year-old kid just go and get these type of style of weapons that can do mass damage? What does he need that for?
He can't
What
even buy a beer in Texas.
yeah.
He can-
What the heck? Yeah. And so that shows you how out of kilter and how to touch, our Congress people, our lawmakers, our county attorneys, because everybody has their hands in this. I mean, why they allow these kind of guns to be on the streets? And this NRA and all this old mess, they need to be put in their place. Like you say, yeah, there's a place for having protection. There's a place for having that. But when they are letting people that have suspect sensibilities, they can just walk in and get anything that they want. And then watching all these video games and doing all these things where, shooting and death is just a game. It's just a game mentality. I mean, I think that's the big problem right there. I mean, I think that's one thing that they can definitely do. They can stop the flow of those kind of weapons out there into the public. Why they don't, I just don't get it. I can't see why that wouldn't be the first thing on their agenda to do. But they have to go back and forth and no, and this our rights and our constitutional rights and all this so forth. Well, constitutional rights apparently aren't keeping people alive. Then they need to be changed too. But I, you know, and they say now the stakes are raised that they're going to actually do something, and it really is because now with these secondary, I forget what they call it, the secondary elections and these things coming up, need to get some candidates in there that are going to do something about this. They need to make that a priority issue to do something about that in this country. But again, here we him and haw about this right, that right, and Don Allen with 45 always hollering about that. This is the kind of problem that we're having. It's getting to the point, James. I went to a political rally yesterday, and it was three candidates here in Minneapolis. It was Don Samuels, who's a community activist person who's running against Ilhan Omar.
Right. I saw him on your program last week. I
Yeah,
think it was.
and then there was a sister that's running for sheriff, and she's not the one we had on the program, but she said she wants to be on the program. I met her at the event. And then there was also Martha Holton Dimmick, who's also been on the program, and she's running for Hennepin County Attorney for Mike Freeman's position. And I think that we need a change because these people can do better. And I mean, we have to really pay a lot more attention to that process and vet these people to see what in the hell are they going to do about what's going on in our country now and in our neighborhoods. And this is happening, these shootings, this it's weekly. It's week. Chicago, I hadn't lost count. My calculator didn't start smoking.
Well, that's kind of another situation there because I also have a problem with the term black on black crime because I think it's poor on poor crime.
You know,
It has nothing to do with your
sure,
color. It has
sure,
to do with
sure,
your neighborhood and things like that.
sure.
But you know,
I get
one of the
that.
things that
The
always
poor
kind
against the broke. Yeah,
of one of the things that kind of I look back on and people are talking about the good old days and what things used to be back in the good old days. Mr. Scott, do you remember the 90s? Do you really think that we have more killing today than we had in the 90s when when crack was rampant in the neighborhood?
well, they used to call Minneapolis Murderapolis. That was our nickname,
See,
Murderapolis. Yeah.
Detroit led in murders for years. So what are you talking about? The good old days. The difference now between now and then is that now instead of putting six in the chamber, you put 300 in the chamber. But this is a problem that we've been dealing with for years, and especially within our neighborhoods. All of a sudden, you have to go through this much paperwork to get food stamps, but you can go and get a gun within 15 minutes. I mean, when you think there are more people, more guns than people, doesn't that tell you something? I mean,
Well, it definitely tells me something. But I mean, these people that are in charge, that this inaction is the stuff that really. I mean, there's just no excuse for it. I mean, there's no, and it goes all the way through this Texas thing. I mean, this is a map of what's going on. You got the authorities standing outside waiting for somebody else to come. Like they have to call their superior. If they have to call some. They sat out there and allow these people to die. I mean, before they put a stop to it. I, I. Now I'm not an NRA. James, are you an NRA member?
no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Probably for a lot of different reasons and people, but no, I'm not. I feel that I don't have to be, a member of an organization when, I earned my NRA badge a different way. So you did, you did, it was, you know, a lot of the people that are in the NRA probably couldn't pass the same test. But that's a different question. you know, and I mean, you see, as I have said many times before, uh, Mr. Scott, one of the reasons, the main reasons why I never hunted or obtained a hunting license. I got a fishing license. I don't mind fishing, going out drowning a few worms, but I never obtained a hunting license because once you've hunted man, there's nothing else that's smarter that you can hunt. Are you going to get a rabbit the gun? Are you going to get a bear a knife? I mean, besides the ones that he's equipped with. So the thought of me having to I mean, I was taught to be very proficient in the army. Bullets cost money. You fire in 3, 4, 5 second clips. I mean, intervals. You don't put 100 rounds down range. That's not efficient. So for you to sit back there with 19 men properly equipped, I mean, why didn't you have a game of poker? Pass out chips. You were just as effective. A border guard comes in from somewhere else while you're standing out front and dispatches the individual. And then the first thing I hear is two things: we need more guns and we need more police. Well, the police were there, didn't use the guns they had.
Well, that's because those arguments they just don't hold water. They're weak as water. I mean, really, they just didn't act. They were derelict in their duty. Um, the training, as you say, it looks like all these law enforcements around the country, they have training, they have access. I mean, they watch this stuff and they're supposed to be prepared for these stuff. I mean, of course, it's your worst nightmare, but that's going to happen. But
That's
though,
what you train for, your worst
yeah,
nightmare. You don't,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Oh, I
when
get
you
it. I know.
when you train for a traffic stop, you train for your worst nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. And they fail. They fail. I mean, they
What?
failed.
And I know I should remember this, but this is the second time, Mr. Scott. And what was the young man in your town? I mean, we this man was asleep, and they pumped however many bullets into him.
Yeah.
Here's a bunch that are standing outside waiting for what, the gunman to run out of bullets.
Two different situations. Uh,
No,
boy,
we're
I mean,
talking. We were talking about training. We're talking about training here. The guy said that's what he was. The guy in your SWAT team said that was he was trained to do because he felt that his life was at risk.
no, exactly. Well, that's what he said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
that's what he
the
said.
others the others said we're not even going to put our life at risk. We're going to wait.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they said that they're not going to do their job. That's what they said. They said, well, we're going to wait for somebody else's higher authority or somebody's not as scared as I am to do our job. And so that's what how this plays out. Hopefully, leads us to better processes with these kind of things. I mean, the one in Minneapolis, I'm still upset about. Here's a person that's asleep, okay, and he's a threat, because they saw a gun kind of slip out of his hand toward the floor, and then they empty bullets in him. He's a threat. Well, what? As you say, the guy in Uvalde, he's not a threat. He's armed to the teeth. He's not a threat. So, I mean, this is the kind of bizarro world that I always say, a bizarro world. I used to read these Superman comic books,
Yeah.
and there was a bizarro world that just didn't make sense. And you could see, and this is really what we're almost living in right now. That people won't step up, do their jobs. We have an inept Congress and political system. We still have nuts running around here saying that the presidency was stolen and that Trump really is still the president. And this fool runs around town, supports all these people, and he runs around like he's still in charge. And I mean, these people allow this stuff. And once they allowed that storming of the Capitol, I mean, it's almost like that just opened up floodgates. I mean, if they can just go in there and do it, what can't we do? What can we do if we decided that nobody's going to stop us? We go into cop and do whatever we want to do. And I mean, I think that
I,
that type of mentality is permeating our existence here in this country now. I mean, we have until they put their foot down and say, no, 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 no. That's, you know, you come into school with a gun, you're emulsified. We going we going to emulsify you. And
Mr. Scott,
until they do that, you know,
you see, once again, you try to make me sound bad here.
no, no, not at
No,
all, not at
but
all.
but suppose you talk about the storming of the Capitol. I really and honestly, in my heart, believe that if those had been people of color doing that, had storming the actions would have been much different.
Say,
I,
say,
I,
say during the
I
Million
mean,
Man March.
I mean, those that see, showing how old I am again, Mister Scott. But I mean, now just they used police and National Guard to clear people from in front of a church so 45 could hold a Bible upside down. Could you imagine if 75 black people had stormed the Capitol? Would we have 50 casualties? Would we have 60? Would we have 74? Can you imagine 12 black people rushing up the steps of Congress? And like I
Yeah,
said, I'm not trying to sound prejudiced, but that's the
sure,
reality of our
sure,
country.
sure it is. And that's what if something had broke out during the Million Man March? Okay, what if something? Don't you think planes and I mean, if something had broke out then? See, but that shows the whole dichotomy of the system. You know, basically, we're not violent. I mean, if we were a violent people, but all the things I used to read stuff, and my mom would tell me about growing up in Birmingham. You know, sitting up, go to a movie, and got to sit upstairs. It's nasty up there. The drinking fountain they had for us never did work. And you know, and me and my brother would be so upset. We were ready to go out here and whoop white people. We ready to just. Why would they treat her? Why would she be treated like this? See, but that shows the whole dichotomy. Those things, and when they talk about make America great again, I mean, some of their thoughts to me goes back to that type of a town, because that type of era, which sitting in, got to sit in certain places, got to walk, I mean, this is. You can legislate, but can you legislate these people's minds and hearts? See, this is where it gets down to.
That see, and that'll get to our last question when we talk about hate and mental health and things like that. But so, Mr. Scott, we kind of talked about this your last election, and most of the people that we talked about were reelected. Is that still going to be a reoccurrence in Minneapolis?
Well, let's hope not. I mean, let's hope not, because they've shown that they haven't done a good job, and that's when they should get voted out. And if nothing else, let's say let's try somebody else. It's really hard to know. You see these candidates, and a lot of these candidates, they get up there and they tell you what they want to tell you so that you vote for them. They're out there stumping for votes. Well, I want to hear, what is your plan? I want to hear, what are you going to do different? I mean, I believe we can do better. And what is your plan to do that? Where are you going to start with this? These are the kind of things that's why I've been going to more of these political things and going to listen to these people and see what the hell are you going to do? Why should I even though they had free food at this place yesterday, it was pretty good food. But you know, I want to know what you're going to do, and that's and this it's clear in the state of Minnesota, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. We need to have we need to flip the script. We need to address this crime, and I always see it as it's a systemic thing. If you don't have some people say, well, I don't want a job. I'm going to be my own businessman. I'm going to be, well, that's great. But see, there's a lot more to that than just saying it. You have to, being in your own business is harder than working for somebody.
and
It's
a
not
lot of
like,
and
it's
a
not a
lot of people
panacea.
don't understand that.
No, they don't
Yeah.
understand that when your first dollar, half of it you got to give to the government. They don't understand that. See, and the next thing they're behind the eight ball right off the bat. But this is an opportunity that I'm looking at for us to vote in. And Don Samuels, I'd like to see him get in. I'd like to see Ilhan in this is my district. This is my district, and I'm going to put up some lawn signs in my area, and I'd like to see a change. And I'd like to see the county attorney is retiring, and so the one who got the endorsement, this lady, I know her because when I was at Child Protection, she was head of the public defenders. She had been head of public. They fired her because she couldn't get along with anybody. And so why do they endorse her when she has been run out of being the public defender because she couldn't get along with anybody? And then you're going to endorse her for your process. And that's the kind of stuff that I think needs to be brought out to the voters. I mean, I think sometimes we are, as citizens and as voters, we're ill informed about these people, and they actually are able to, put all these commercials on TV. They have the money, they're endorsed, they're behind, a candidate that's probably not as good as
But
another candidate.
Mr. Scott, I heard your current mayor, Fry, said that he would no longer endorse no knock warrants. And then the incident that we were just talking about.
Yeah, well, he said that before, so
That's that's
yeah,
that was before you elected into this term.
yeah, and then now his strategy is, we're gonna get people together to talk about it. We're gonna just talk about what's going. No movement on the George Floyd Square area. I mean, it's being run by people that have just kind of taken over the area. I mean, so all the businesses and all the things there are struggling because it's not a coherent plan. We're 10 blocks down the street on 48th in Chicago. Oh, they have everything. They are rebuilding the streets. They are rebuilding the businesses. There's everything you can think of is there. Clinics, doctors, dentists, stores, shops. Why do they let that place just languish and not come up with a plan to do anything? And it just shows the ineptitude. And that's just in one neighborhood, in one area. And I haven't seen Ilhan Omar, this is her district, around the Memorial year, they come around. That's it. You don't see them no more. Andrea Jenkins, City Council. Now I think Andrea Jenkins is president of the City Council. Is from this area, and they're not doing anything. And I think people just are not holding them accountable to do something. And that whole process, we have a thing here. I don't know if they have this in California or San Diego, but it's called ranked choice voting. In ranked
They
choice voting,
they
you
they tried that, I believe. You get first, second, third choice or
first,
something.
first, second, and third, and I'm like, why in the hell am I going to vote for somebody I don't want? Why give just for the sake of giving? And I've never ranked choice. I just vote for the person that I want. I don't go with the second and third. I don't understand the premise of that. But that's another thing. And they're attacking now. You can see the voting. They're attacking now with, what was it in Georgia? You can't have nobody a sip of water while they're in line. When they come up with all these things, this is make America great again. See,
Well,
this is,
well,
we control.
they re-gerrymandered the districts in Texas.
That's another thing that that's another thing that they did. That's
So,
another thing
you
that they
know,
did.
they
They,
did the same thing. And now, uh, I think the one case where the Democrats were found guilty of the same thing, Jerry, I believe it might have been New York. But other than that, I mean, you look at, as you said, and Dr. K said, I've talked about this because one of the projects that I wanted to do was deliver water to the voters in line in Atlanta. But now, in order for you to do that, you need a bail bonds fund in case somebody gets arrested. I
well,
mean,
you can
I mean,
see how ridiculous Georgia is when they put Herschel Walker, a total buffoon, a total buffoon. That's why I want to ask Dr. Casey about this. Yeah, she's down there in Atlanta. I mean, this
yes,
guy can't make two words together. And he's endorsed by Trump, and oh my goodness, he's just out there, and he's leading. He's leading in their polls there. Now,
well, he's leading the GOP polls. I hope and pray that he's not going to be Vernock, and I mean,
boy, I don't
and,
know.
and it's not, to me, it's kind of like the devil in the deep blue sea. I got this buffoon Herschel on the one side, and then I have Reverend on the other, and me and religion, you, but 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 you know. So let's. I want to get back on track here because you also have dealt with a lot of shootings in uh, Minneapolis. I believe one you have shooting polls or something like that that can pinpoint or kind of put the neighborhood that these
Yeah,
gunshots ring out and stuff like
shot
that.
spotters. They call them shot spotters. Yeah.
Shot spotters. Okay. So let's think about these shot spotters and let's think about the record of law enforcement. Now, your law enforcement seems to take, whereas you would think that it was Texas that would shoot first and ask questions later, but it seems to happen a lot around your neck of the woods too. So, what what do you think is what do you think that we should expect from law enforcement when it comes in terms of protection? Do they see 50 shot spotters go off and decide that they want to go patrol in the other side of town? Because it seems like those days of like rushing to the scene are over.
Well, James, up here, what I can say is there'll be shootings regularly, but they never catch the people. They say it's never been, there's no arrests. There's two people dead or two people shooting on the freeway. That they never release any names. And I can tell by what neighborhood these things happen in here who the likely people involved are. I mean, I can
see,
tell just by telling me what
see,
street it happened at.
see, see, and you tell me I can't come to Minneapolis and get a gun in 45 minutes.
They,
See,
and they
but
never they never catch
that's
they never
always
catch
been the
anybody.
case.
They
That's
never catch.
always been the case,
Okay,
Mister
but
Scott. In
but
the
growing up,
1990s, you knew everybody on your street that was selling drugs, that was doing all the dirt, that were
Yeah,
breaking into
yeah.
houses. Come on.
I know who these people are. Yeah,
And today you have modern technology, but I
but
don't
the
know.
police don't seem to know. They don't seem to know. And so, but another thing I want to go back to, from here, growing up here on the south side of Minneapolis, there used to be a gas station right in the heart, owned by this guy from Mississippi, Kirk Anderson. And you go there to get gas, and everybody, all the guys in town are sitting in there, the older people. I go in there to get gas. They're like, "That's Scotty's son. That's Scotty's son right there." They
They're
say
sitting
he's
around
one.
playing checkers.
They're sitting around, and two of them were police. Two of them were. There was one guy that was there all the time. I had no idea he was a policeman. I had no idea of it. I just saw him sitting there drinking coffee with these people. But these people like him, were integrated into our community. And maybe that's not the right word. They were specific. They lived in our community with us. I could go right down the street and see Riley Gilchrist 2 blocks away. He's a policeman. Red Presley, lieutenant, right down the street. I go to the club. There's Red Presley and Commodore. They're right there in the club with us. You know, Nobody's gonna fool with them. I mean, there was more of a you felt that somebody is in charge, and I mean, I think that's what's missing now. I don't really see a connection with the police, the people, and what is actually going on in this neighborhood. They need to have a hand. I don't need to have a hand. I'm not going to go out there and get these people. you know, they need to have a handle, and they need to engage people that know their areas and know their communities. But James, we've talked about that before. We don't really have a community anymore. We don't really have that mindset. I mean, people are moving and they're more transient now. People don't stay in one place for a long time. They continue to so but they still have to have policing, I believe, that's connected to the community. And I just like at that school, there should have been an officer. Maybe my kid is at that school. Doggone right, I'm not going to let nobody in there. And that piece. I think that piece is missing. Yeah,
But, I believe it was in Florida, Mr. Scott, we had another security guard walk away from a school with an active shooter, so-called security guard or whatever. And as I asked you before, you know, are we going? Is the answer to have more guns? And just take this scenario for instance. I mean,
mhm.
here's a kid that's in a school with an automatic weapon that shoots approximately what I think it was. Well, we'll just say 60 rounds per second per minute. Because you can squeeze off a clip in less than 15 seconds, I believe. But you have a shooter. You have a teacher that has a revolver. Are those odds good? Or has any type of a handgun? You're going to put. It's okay for you to put that teacher's life at risk, but you have 19 professionals that says that I'm afraid to go in. We had two teachers slain in this particular instance that were unarmed. According to the timeline, some of these people bled out while those people were sitting there waiting to take action.
What the heck is this?
Yeah, you keep telling us about that fine wine, Mister Scott. I don't know. I'm gonna start thinking that you indulging in illegal activities here.
No, not quite.
I don't know. You ain't got a Cadillac parked out there in the back somewhere, do you? I don't know.
But I guess so, James, is your point then that the teachers need to have guns?
No, my point is that we don't need guns in schools. Period. That's my point. But we need properly trained and properly dedicated officers to be able to intervene if that should happen. I mean, I don't living. I think the New York school system has had metal detectors. I want to say since the '90s, but I don't want my child or my grandson or to have to worry about the guy sitting next to him wearing a blue bandana and the guy sitting on the other side of him wearing a red bandana. I mean, I've actually, uh, I don't know if you've kept up with my story for the last two months or so, but I actually had a nephew, uh, 2 days after his 18th birthday, get picked up on a gun charge in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, along with that and the drug charges that he's facing, he will be locked up for the next decade.
Mm.
And, you know, eh, for a while I felt a sense of guilt, remorse, all of that because I've given you the blueprint on what not to do. And I mean, it's like, taking, like they say, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that was, I mean, and then to find out, that, adults are living off of his ill-gotten gain on top of it, and now those adults have abandoned him. Well, I mean, what did you expect? That's the life that you chose. But getting back on point here, you know, just like you talk about those gunshots being in certain areas, the police know who's doing dirt in these areas. The police could probably at any time go and pick these people up. Blase, blase. Okay. But we are so ingrained in putting people in jail, but we're not ingrained in keeping people from going to jail. In other words, my nephew didn't get picked up with an AR-15. He got picked up with a revolver. Should we do them like we do cocaine? You remember back when they had crack cocaine? If you had powder cocaine, you got one sentence. If you had crack cocaine, you got another sentence. I mean, what are we doing to our children?
Well,
You you
yeah,
you, you,
it's
you spoke about video games. Do you really think that at one time I kind of said, well, maybe that does desensitize them to a certain extent,
hmm
but Mr. Scott, reality tells me that if I put my hand on this table and I hit it with a hammer, it's going to hurt.
hmm hmm Well, it seems to be a real proliferation where people have feel they have to have guns, and so there's like the problem itself creates its own problem. When I start hearing people getting shot, I mean, there was a guy right around the corner. They got into it and killed somebody just a block away. They found a body just down the street. And so people hear this kind of stuff and it's kind of like, well, baby, I better load up again. Maybe I better. And so it causes its own. I mean, if they feel if the police aren't going to do it, like the guy that went into Uvalde and told police, look, just give me the gun, give me the vest. I go in here and do this. I mean, this is what it begins to create, and so you're going to have more guns. You're going to have more. I think more people on edge about possibility of things happening. It's I until to me until they deal with the avenue of the guns, our laws have never been equitable. They've never been treated equitable. They've never been. It's a crapshoot. It can depend on what judge you get. It can depend on what defense you have. It can depend on any number of things that are out of the person's control. They may even after they may realize that they made a mistake and want to do something, but now you're caught up in this. Now you're caught up in this thing. And how do I get out of it? Well, maybe I get a gun and boom. I mean, I think that those things to me are just continue to be the elephant in the room. And if we don't have the sense that law enforcement and the police are going to do their job, I know for one, James King, he'll load up if he thought that his back was against the wall, he had no problem with it. But I mean, I think
None whatsoever. It's just, it's, no, I mean,
but I mean that's what kind of exacerbates the whole thing. Once we feel that we don't have faith in our police, and I think here the whole defund movement was just misstated. I think when I talk to you and you really break down your thoughts, it's remake the police, it's reform the police, and that's the things that I'm talking about with the community and having people that have some investment in the area. I think can only help. I mean, I could tell you when I grew up, I knew at least 10 law enforcement guys that were in my neighborhood. And I'm talking about sheriffs, police, highway patrol, right there in the neighborhood. And I just think that has at least it did when I was coming up here. It had an effect. And
and Scott, I'll also let you know another little secret of my success or whatever you want to call it. Because I too grew up in a neighborhood that had a lot of law enforcement and police. One of my best friends I had been to Vietnam with. But one thing that I learned: if you don't crap where you eat, you can get away with a whole lot of things. But if you don't terrorize your neighborhood, that's the one thing that they would not allow. You are not going to terrorize my neighborhood.
yeah,
Now, what you do over on the south side or wherever, as long as you don't bring that garbage back over here,
you go over St. Paul and do whatever you want.
you know,
Yeah,
and and I mean, you know, uh, uh, I've made this confession many times too, so this is nothing new. But when I was in high school, one of our favorite hobbies on the weekend would be to jump on the train from Jersey and go to New York and rob the fags. Well, excuse me, LGT, whatever. But
I,
anyway,
I
you
get your drift.
know, you know, and if you got caught by the New York police, the worst that was going to happen to you is that they were going to take your money and put you on the train back to Jersey and tell you, don't let me catch you over here again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's not about the police not knowing who does dirt. Come on. you, but
But yeah,
then,
to that point about
but then again, Mr. Scott, I'm sure that any of those men that you named And then the men that I knew would not have been sitting around having a discussion when 21 people are being killed.
No, no, not at all. I know your point is well taken about going out of your neighborhood because we used to go to St. Paul to see the girls and stuff, but they didn't want us over there. And so I didn't go on this one trip with my cousins, and so they went over there, and their transmission went out, so they had to back up all the way from St. They drove in reverse all the way back to Minneapolis to get out of there. I mean, so yeah, I think the community aspect, longtime chief of police in St. Paul, Mr. Bill Finney. I went to college with him. He was my dorm guy, and matter of fact, we got into a thing at some kind of club in Mankato, and the guys outside said they had a gun, and we come out there. So we called him, and he came, and he got us out of there. So eh, I think the idea of guns and weapons, I don't think it's going to ever go away. I don't know that it should go away. But I think this proliferation of these military style bullets that can shoot, have a guy coming in with 300 rounds and all this kind of foolishness. I just think that's and it has been a recipe for disaster. I think it's just been a recipe for disaster.
And, you know, a lot of people, another issue that a lot of people don't want to talk about is, Mr. Scott, you can make a gun on your computer today. They're called ghost
Yeah,
guns.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, so if you still,
yeah.
and I mean, so I might not have to come to your town. I can just buy the right computer. Now, you know, make one at home, throw it away, ball it up, whatever you do. I'm not familiar with that technology, but
True, true.
I mean, so how can you get rid of guns? And now, true, so far they haven't made it those type of mass weapons, but you know, Apple, Microsoft, somewhere down the line, I mean, but the thing is, if we're making access to guns easier, should it be magazine? Should it be handguns and ban the assault weapons? Or do you think that there's some type of compromise that eventually will be reached that says
Well,
we should ban all?
isn't there some type of process? I mean, different states are different, but in getting a gun, you have to say what you want to use it for. I mean, what if I go in there and say I want a military style thing that I can kill 300 people with? I can get three. Does the guy say, why do you want that? What's your purpose in having that? That doesn't even seem to be part of the process. And then, like
Second
you say,
Amendment.
what?
Second Amendment. That's
Yeah, well, see, yeah. So
it.
but see, at that time, the Second Amendment, they didn't have guns like that. They didn't have no guns like that in the Second Amendment. See, they continue to fall back on these things that don't make any sense. They didn't have those kind of guns then.
Yeah, I don't remember private citizens having Gatling guns back in the day, but maybe if I do enough research, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, Mr. Scott, uh, I want to touch on this mental health thing, and I found a sign that said "Stop the Hate." Now, most of these shooters have had some type of manifesto or some type of uh,
Mhm.
thing that they write out and
Yes.
talk about how America is becoming this and being taken over by minorities. So to me, these people are hate mongers. Now, is hate a mental illness or is it a conscious decision?
Well, that's kind of a two-pronged question. I mean,
We
hate,
got time. It's-
hate is, something that's acquired. It may be something that comes into their environment, or I mean, what causes someone to hate someone that they don't even know? What causes them to? And some of hate to me is really related to um, white supremacy, meaning that I can go into McDonald's and get a job. Same day, another white guy get a job. Same thing, same day. Well, the boss is out, but then this other white guy thinks he can order me around, tell me what to do. Now we got the same job, get the same pay, the same everything, but he thinks he should be above me. And I think that that's related to the issue of hate. There's something that's ingrained to say that I don't know this person. Why, how do I build up all this animosity and hate and fear and all this thing for this person? And I think that that's attributable back to white supremacy. I mean, I think that that's people think that they have the right, they have, and you don't. And let's face it, I mean, the whole discrimination thing and all this stuff we've gone through in this country is basically about one thing: white folks don't want us around you. They don't want to. They want to go out to the. They built the suburbs and put freeways out there so they could get away from us and be out there. They didn't plan for us to come out there. Just like when they did their um, constitution, it didn't cover us. This was them. This didn't. We were an afterthought. And these things came along after, and they gave a lot of words to it. And the whole mental health game is just that. I mean, selling these pills and all. I mean, that's $1 billion industry. They got all these little diseases that they say people have, Asperger's and all this old foolishness. I mean, who knows what the ideology of these things are? James, when we were kids, they had a thing, Anacin. You got neuritis, you got neuralgia, take Anacin. Well, hell, what the hell is neuritis and neuralgia? I don't even hear about that shit no more. But see, that is a whole industry that gets you hooked on these things. They're the dope dealers. I mean, really, what it comes down to get you hooked on these things. And I forget all these, they give these kids this Ritalin. They was given all the stuff that I would go through with child protection and parents and kids were
Yeah, I
bouncing off
was
the
I was a
walls.
I was a Ritalin kid. I can tell you about that.
And there's another thing that they call, I forget what it's called. For some reason I can't call it now, a mental health thing that, I mean, you can't even really diagnose it. They just, but if a doctor says you got it, you got it. I
Well,
mean, it's,
it used to be almost standard procedure if you were going uh, to prison. The first thing that they would, one of the first prescriptions that they would give you is called lithium
yeah, yeah.
because it tends to uh, make you not be so aggressive.
Hmm.
And then they went, of course, they went from that, they went all the way batshit crazy and had, what was it? It begins with a T. Uh, and you would see guys walking around like zombies. It was before methadone, but it was yeah, but kind of like getting back on that vein of hate or a mental conscious thing. I in some ways I agree with you, but does that would that mean that once you hate that you're never capable of not hating? Could you ever, in other words, like like they do to so-called criminals, can you be rehabilitated from hate?
Well, yeah, I think it's your circumstances that can help you rehabilitate. I mean, let's face it. We live in a world with there's just all kinds of people in the world, and for me, as a man, if I see a girl and she's pretty, I don't care what thing she is. She can be working at McDonald's and be, I mean, if they look good, they look, and so it has no bearing to and I think in people's attraction to people, it really has no bearing, but it's what goes along with that causes the problems. The two people could be fine, but then what about their families? What about their people that are in their thing? What about if you go to a picnic when somebody says something out of pocket to me, and I mean, that's not funny. That's blah blah blah. And so that's where it comes in. I think the individual person can make that choice. That they can associate or be in an environment or accept the culture that they want to. But and then I guess that does answer your question in a way. At least my opinion on it is that sometimes the hate can't go away. I mean, there's some people that, what Hatfields, McCoys, they say they just hated each other. They didn't even know why. They just hated each other, you know. And so, but I think that there's a stigma really with people of color. And I mean, I think that that's at the root. And again, I take it back to the white supremacists. I take it back to that thing that they think, they're in charge and we're bit players in this movie. We're just, step and fetch it. We bucking our eyes, and that's as they used to make those movies. I used to like to watch the Charlie Chan and Birmingham Brown, and but that's all a stereotype. That's all something that continues to perpetuate, as we would say, like the Tarzan. He's there in the jungle, can talk to apes, can talk to everything, and everybody, a whole tribe runs from him when they see him. You know, but that's the continued of this stereotype madness that it's still played out. And as I watch TV now, it's still played out in their commercials. It's still played out. It's I don't know that it goes away. I just think that it's really permeated this society, and and then you throw the mental health piece in. See, now it's always they're mentally ill. Okay, well, he's just mentally ill, so that's okay. We can just take care of him. Blah blah blah. I said, yeah, but he killed all these people. Okay, well, that's just mental illness. That's you know, and then it gets down to the thought of, well, can this be, like you say, can it be cured? Do these pills, do these Ritalin, do all these things take care of a, well, I just see that as a big, these pills and all that, it's all tied together, with mental health and treatments, and I I'm at a loss, actually.
Well, and I understand the frustration, but have you noticed, Mr. Scott, that these people that perpetuate these different lies are old people. These people are 60 and older. You don't. I mean, outside of a few nuts like Jim pedophile Jordan and Marjorie, whatever his name is, that doesn't know that Puerto Rico is a territory. I mean, these people are the same people that were elected when you were in your 40s and your 30s? Can we expect a change if we keep putting the same damn people in office?
Well, apparently not. This is all the inactivity. If you're not going to be in fast motion to see these kids killed in a school, if you're not going to rally the troops and say, look, we've got to put a stop to this, and we're going to put the message out there that this will no longer be tolerated in this country, in this community, in this state, no, then they can't. They can't. I mean, if that doesn't do it, I don't think nothing will. And I think we have to get these people out of there. We've talked about term limits. We've talked about, and then, for the Congress, is 2 years enough? Do we have to keep going after? Well, maybe they need a couple of 2-year terms, to figure out what's going on. But we
I
need
would,
to have people that can
I
hit the
would be,
ground.
I would be willing to give them 8 to 10 years and gone because I realize it takes time to get things done.
Yeah, yeah,
But as long as I mean, we had one guy that died not too long ago that's been in office longer than I've been living. What was it, Thurman? How
It-
long was Strong
yeah.
Thurman?
Which is ridiculous. And how effective can someone like that be? I mean, at some point, um,
Did
that
somebody read the laws to him? I mean, at some point the glasses don't work. I got
yeah,
I got two I got a couple pair right here. VA gives them to me. All I gotta do is need when I need to change, they give them to me. But it comes a time every year, so I got hey doc, like old people say, well, I got to work with the computer. I need to, I mean, it, it, I might, be wrong, but I think once you need the pens, it's time to go home.
it's been past time to go. And we have a whole lot of them sitting there, and that are doing nothing. Obviously, I mean, how they can again, how you
And
can sit
I, and
out
I
in the
understand, yeah, and I understand it's a condition, but I mean, it,
you know,
usually you have to get it to a certain age before you start experiencing these type of difficulties. You know, thankfully I haven't gotten there yet, knock on wood. But I mean,
yeah.
like I said, I mean, there are people in Congress that have me by a decade. There are people in their 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. 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 And how in touch are they with what's really going on, even in their own communities? They want to jump on this national stage, but first of all, they need to work on their own communities. All these killings, all these, they need to be involved with that. They need to be involved with what's going on with their constituents. But it's the whole celebrity type of thing, where they can, put on the crisp suits and the dress up and get their hair done, get on TV and just spout off a few things here and there. But what are they really? We don't see the results. And I think that that's where they are actually rallying their troops to mess around with the voting, to mess around with the voting districts, to because their goal seems to be they got in there and they just like it so much. Oh boy, the travel, the our congressperson here, she lives in Washington D.C. She don't even come back here. She lives in Washington D.C. She don't even come around here. I've never seen her in this community to talk to people to nothing. And so, I mean, I'm focusing on that because I'm here. And so she needs to go. She's not causing not doing anything.
uh, well, we are joined by Miss Sims and Brother Williams. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Greetings all, greetings all.
Good, good.
Uh, you missed a lot of the discussion, so I'm gonna make Mr. Scott uh, kind of reiterated a lot of the things that we were talking about. But of course, as you know from my topics, I am. I was very upset with what happened in Uvalde, and I put up a picture and captioned it "The Cowards of Uvalde,"
Yep.
and I got a lot of blowback from that.
What kind of
as
blowback you get from the truth?
well, that's because it was the truth. But I could not understand, and I put up. I think that there's a statute in Texas that says that police officers are not liable criminally or civilly for not taking immediate action.
Yeah,
So,
negligence, but yeah.
so what type of protection are you supposed to expect from law enforcement when they tell you we were afraid to die? I mean,
It's funny, but it's not
I,
funny.
I've never met a door that I wasn't fearful of going through. It was the actions and the training that I had that made me believe that
Yeah.
when the smoke clears, I'm gonna be standing. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna be standing. But that does not negate that fear of going through that door.
Well, let's look at it like this: it the same fear that causes a cop to kill black people because they are afraid of us works. You got fight or fright, fight or flight. With black folks, it's fight. With other folks, it's flight. And so all I see, and I think you summed it up when you said cowards. I mean, they were cowards. It's is much, and it's hard for us, especially as black folks, not to draw the contrast between, uh, like for instance, we saw that shooting to where they shot this pregnant black lady who was, you know, I guess trying to, not doing any, not posing any threat at all to the police. They shoot a pregnant black lady that's not doing anything as it applies to being violent or life threatening to the police officer, but yet you got babies and children, your little children held up in the classroom, and they're afraid to enter the other side.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah. And
parents
Texas
have
has
the yeah.
more. Texas has more law enforcement people, and that's
Yes.
Texas is almost like another country. I mean, they have
Yeah.
more law. The Texas Rangers, big old tall hats, and all that old stuff. They got more law enforcement, and one guy can come into this school and kill these people, and they stand there and look at it. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's actually it's I would say that is a unique situation because I come from Texas, and in Texas we used to find any and every reason to carry guns. Anybody, Texas is a gun-toting state, and so to have law enforcement scared is I don't even know what to call it in Texas. That's just literally a unique situation in Texas that I'm familiar with, to where law enforcement were afraid. They so used to people with guns that that's they I in Dallas, Texas, that wasn't the situation. Law enforcement wasn't afraid in Dallas, so I just got to say that those are some cowards. They need to resign. They had no business being police officers or even flashlight carrying security guards. They just need to not be in the profession. And in fact, I feel, going back to what James was saying, there should be some type of criminal action that should be able to be opposed against them, because we're talking about loss of life, as well as they prevented others from trying to go in there and do what they were afraid to do. And see that, so you turn from bad to worse. You prevent anybody from going in there, but yet you ain't gonna go in there.
yeah,
And I'm trying
yeah.
to
One of
save
the
my
fathers
baby.
said, "Give me the vest, give me the gun. I go in there and do it. That's what one of the fathers said. That's how
Like I
bad
said,
that was.
that's the spirit I'm used to in Texas. That's the spirit I'm used to in Texas. So these law enforcement, I don't know what rock they was hiding under, or what I guess donut beat they was on most of their time to where they never had to confront any situations. But
Getting a lot of interference, Miss Sims.
I do. Okay.
you got just mute until you're talking, Miss Sim. Oh, she probably can't hear us because she took a headphone off. Oh, there you go. All right, but yeah, I don't even know what to call it other than it's obviously nothing about the situation was appropriate, and even to a lot of degree, we're hearing that the school is trying to suppress a lot of the information. So
They're
yeah,
not
this
talking.
is a bad
They're
one,
not
right?
talking. I saw some. They're not going to talk. They're
Right.
going to kind of, I guess,
Because
lawyer up or
yeah,
whatever.
that's it. You dealing with lawsuit city. So that's the problem with this situation. From the city, the police department and the school, I'm sure are facing class action lawsuits at this point. So
But
yeah,
if they're not liable criminally or civically, how can that litigate?
well, I'm pretty sure there's going to be an attorney to find some kind of way around that. Maybe not criminally, but they're going to find some kind of way. They're going to find some loophole. That's why they're not talking. But there's something out there.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, they're not going to bring the lives back. And that was a situation where, when it first went down, the children were not dead. And
No.
it wasn't until later on, I mean, the guy had all the time to do it. And when they report that the bodies were so disfigured that they had to do DNA, that tells you how much time he had to shoot up the same bodies over and over, because that's exactly what that means. Because shooting somebody, with an assault rifle or any weapon, a double tap to the head is not going to make it to where you can't identify the child.
No.
That's literally a bloodbath where you just had all the time in the world to just keep going and keep at it, because no one's coming to the door, no one's doing anything. So it's like he just had all the time in the world to just be the evilest thing, period. And the fact that he shot his grandmother let you know what they were up against from that standpoint. So it's like, somebody's life was probably going to get lost if they bust the door down. But the idea here is you could have saved many of lives. There was no reason that many people had to die, none whatsoever. That was just an all around blunder, period, point blank. And you know, I really don't know what to say. I did hear some other silliness where Donald Trump was talking about having a resource office in every school. Hell, that wasn't. You already had a damn resource officer in the
That's
school.
fool.
He walked away. But see, once again, you talk about arming teachers. Okay, so a teacher with a magazine with a 9mm versus an AR-15. Really?
I still say I'm gonna be honest. I support the teachers being able to be armed, because I think if it had if you had a armed teacher that's not afraid to use it, you're dealing with close quarters. So what the AR-15 is irrelevant at that point. I mean, it's still a semi-automatic.
Yeah,
So
but
within 20, 25 yards of what you're dealing with within a small confined room, the AR-15 has no more of advantage than a small arm.
but my question is, how can you expect your teacher to have more courage than your
You
police
can't.
department?
No, you can't. You can't. That does the whole point of the teachers being armed is the fact that the police are going to show up after the fact. That's usually the case anyway. They show up after the fact, and then they end up killing somebody when they do show up. Typically the wrong people. The person that may have called, going back what we dealt with here in San Diego, the police were called to try to come intervene and save a life. They end up killing the person who was who was in hurt, that in pain, that needed the support of the police officer. So from that standpoint, arming yourself, it just has to do with the first line of defense, knowing that by the time the police get there, the situation it is already out of control, either by them or the fact that they're going to show up and deal with cleanup. That's all it is. We have to be prepared as people to defend ourselves, and I've always been an advocate for that. You don't call the police to come defend you. You call the police to attempt to de-escalate a situation if it's not already there. But when we're talking about guns getting drawn and lives in danger, you don't have time. There's no time for police on that matter. You
So,
have to act fast.
so Brother Williams, what type of protection should we expect as the public? And I'm not talking about the black community. I'm talking about it as the public, because I mean, are we
Well,
supposed to expect from law enforcement?
we are supposed to expect law enforcement to be able to come in and handle a situation and be able to take control and save lives from that standpoint. What took place in that school was, I would say, in a typical scenario, maybe one or two children could have died in that room with the officers busting the door down and doing what they needed to do. But that was it. That would have been a situation. And obviously, from that standpoint, any loss of life is a tragedy. But you literally had a entire room full of children. So it's like, either you save who you can. You save who you can, and to use the excuse of waiting to get a key when they serve no knock warrants all the damn time is just, that's just pulling something out your ass. That's just the bottom line. That's pulling something out your ass. I was waiting for a key. That don't even sound right coming from law enforcement. It's like whoever's handling the media, the media at that point is doing a bad job with damage control. How do you even let that get out in the media and think that's going to think that's not going to get you in more and more heat?
Uh,
That's just crazy.
Miss Sims, I know you've been waiting for a little time here, but we're getting a lot of distortion from your mic.
I took my headset off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what it is. The same mic I usually use, but I unplugged it and I'm just speaking on my computer's.
Okay.
Hearing now.
So, Miss Sims, you've gotten on me before about my idea of police reform. Now, I think what happened in Texas. Maybe you should turn your volume down. Maybe you should turn your volume down.
There we go.
How about now?
You're fine. You're fine right now. So, what did you think about the events? Whatever you're pushing on, don't.
Okay.
Okay. leave it right there.
Okay.
So, what did you think about the events that happened in Uvalde, and about the officers, 19 officers, waiting while children are being slaughtered?
Two things. If you're gonna be afraid to be shot, let me know ahead of time. Say so ahead of time before something comes up and you are in the position to use your gun. Say let me know ahead of time so that
So I can take your
on the
bag.
scene. And
So
number
I can
two,
take your bag.
There's
and
no
number two,
conscientious objectors to the law enforcement.
huh?
There are no conscientious objectors in law enforcement.
And number two, if you let me know ahead of time, then that means you're gonna stop taking my money to protect these children than anybody else. And then also that plays into the high level of comfort of the what is that immunity factor that police are covered by in regards to it covering them, and they knowing and feel a high level of comfort that the union is going to protect them and the judicial system. That to me, that plays into it as I watched it, and I've heard other people, parents, even a parent ran bypassed them and went into the building per se. And she was speaking the other day on the
Went in and got her 2 children out.
right, and then went back to look for others, and so did the law enforcement person that did go in, and said that all comes under the, for me, of the level that I've been saying in regards to looking at the police union and even doing away with that that blanket immunity type coverage. Maybe at one time, the history of why it came into play, it seems like it's no longer there because people's and society's behavior has changed. If you're scared, to me, if you have a gun and buy a gun, then it's to be used. You're somewhere down the line, you are going to use it for good or for bad. And so if you're going around, especially holding a gun and being paid to hold that gun, the expectations is that you're going to be protecting somebody other than you and your own self-interest. They had the way the behavior just lollygagging around, showed a high comfort level that, hey, it is what it is from their attitude. I was talking to earlier today, I was talking to someone from the DOJ, Department of Justice, and Senator Tina Smith's office, related to police brutality here in the city, especially regarding to the homeless encampments. And that's one of the things that I said to her also, as I've been saying to other people, that in looking to and they're doing an investigation separate from the civil, the police things, that the police union, the high comfort level that police officers have and show, some of this is due to the police union protecting them, and that blanket covers of immunity. And those two things need to be looked at, changed, done away with, etc., etc. And Mr. Scott, I did hear the earlier conversation, because I came on. And again, I thank you for standing there, holding up that justice banner regarding James always puts in thought-provoking but sometimes hard questions lobbed towards you, but you hang in there and you answer them. And I really admire you and give you respect for doing that. Not only with James, but also with Don Allen. I watched that show too.
Well, yeah, I have a thank you, Ms. Sims. I have a reputation, with the James. See, I'm like a Ernie Shavers. There used to be a guy, a little boxer, Ernie Shavers. Nobody wanted nothing to do with Ernie Shavers. Everybody avoided him. And so that's, I've taken on that as my persona. And sometimes we just need to say things, when we say things like James and I was talking earlier about we'll probably get into it about how this mental health and all these excuses that come up. And some of these things really come back down to white supremacy. They come down to really it comes right down to that issue where they think, like I was telling James, if I go to work at a McDonald's, the white guy starts the same time I do, and then the boss is out, the white guy's going to start bossing me around. He's going to think he can tell me what to do just because he's white, and I think that those things, even when they use the mental health aspect, they use these things to kind of cover what they're really doing. And I think as far as the gun, and this is going on in all over our country. I mean, this shooting stuff is not just here.
Right.
But how are these people? How is this young man in particular in Texas? How does he get a weapon of that magnitude? I mean, once you go get weapons, don't you have to fill out something? Don't you have to say? Wouldn't the person selling it say, "What do you need this for? Who are you going to war somewhere with somebody?"
Well, let me answer that, Scott, because again, when, like I said, Texas is a gun culture. Now,
Yeah,
mind you, the
yeah,
deal is assault rifles are just all classified in when it comes to federal law, and that, I mean, a rifle is a rifle from that standpoint. So you in Texas, you can purchase a rifle and a shotgun at the age 18, and you can't purchase a handgun until you turn 21. Reason being, the way they view that law is rifles and shotguns are primarily used for hunting, and the legal age that they want you to, to be able to hunt, and you have to have it visible, is the age 18. And I know that very well because when I turned 18, I went and purchased my first shotgun, in my name. Again, for hunting, because Texas is that kind of a culture. But, when you're dealing with an environment like that, and that's just America, period. America, it loves its guns. But when we talk about children now, we have to talk about the mental health aspect to that by there not being a way to deal with mental evaluation, and there not being a waiting period, because I actually do better or worse support the waiting period idea, because too many times people have been known to just go out and buy a gun in the heat of being pissed off. And so by having a waiting period, that eliminates, a good deal of emotional purchases, because sometimes people have been known to purchase guns out of being emotionally pissed off or ticked off in the moment. And then when you go into that gun store and knowing that it's going to take 7 days, that in itself, a lot of times have deterred a lot of some people from doing stupid, foolish stuff as it applies to weapons. But the difference between the 18 and the 21-year-old and the 21 years of age has to do with the fact that a rifle or a shotgun is called a long barrel, and long barrels, because they are long and typically can't be concealed, you can purchase them at a younger age. And that's the mentality behind it. It has nothing to do with the fact that obviously a long barrel weapon has a more kill range, and a more lethal of a weapon. Is just known that from
yeah.
that standpoint, me being able to tuck a handgun in my pocket, and then just go into any environment versus having a long arm where you can see that visibly a person is a threat, was the reasoning behind that.
Well, Brother Williams, let me ask you another question then, because every one of these young men, whether it was the one in Buffalo, the one in Texas, the one in Florida, Columbine, all of these young men have written some type of manifesto. So, do we qualify? To me, this is hate.
Yeah, that is
So,
definitely hate.
is hate a mental issue, or is it a conscious decision?
No, let me explain it. It's a mixture, because hate is typically something that is passed down typically through generation. It's a taught behavior. It's a taught behavior that is sick. It's a sick taught behavior. But once that behavior is taught and that behavior is accepted as justifiable, now you're dealing with a warped mentality that justifies any and every action that goes into what you deal with when you're in an environment of hate. So that hate also, when you're taught to hate somebody, it also reflects on yourself. So that even folds into what we talk about when we deal with self-hate. So hating others tend to also create concepts of self-hate. But in this modern time now, what we in, to where social media tends to be where a lot of the youth are gaining their social interaction experience, and galvanizing their peership through social media versus through actual in exchange with people. Now we're dealing with, not only are we coupling hate into the mix, but we're also talking about social immaturity. And this social immaturity is something that also lends itself toward certain types of I wouldn't call it mental illness at all, but what it is a warped sense of perspective. It's a warped perspective that they have, and you couple that with again emotional immaturity, lack of critical thinking, lack of ability to deal with their emotional outlet, so to speak. And so now all of a sudden, guns are readily available, and you add that into the mix, drugs, add that into the mix, it's a counter peg. So we're just dealing with a situation where, unfortunately, the youth now have less interaction with adults, less interaction with grandparents because of social media. So sticking people in front of a screen and letting them get all this type of interaction without any type of dialogue or filtering. See, that's what we're dealing with: lack of filtering and lack of dialogue to explain and to moderate what's going on and what's being brought into their environment. And then you have less actual social interaction within your own peer group and your own family environment. So these type of things create emotional immaturity, and that emotional immaturity, as the children gets older, so we talk about the time they become 18, they have this level of frustration, and they don't know how to properly uh deal with anger. They don't know how to properly deal with that. And so having that emotional immaturity now at an age of 18, they go from one extreme to the other extreme.
James,
Yes, Miss Sims.
can you hear me? I totally agree with one of the words that Robert used in regards to children and hatred being taught, because kids don't come into the children don't come into the world, sucking all this information out of their thumbs. They're getting that information, and it goes against the grain of what a child is to not learn something. So their minds are, whether they realize it or not, or we realize it or not, their minds are always going and picking up stuff, things that's all around them. An example is when the child begins to crawl, nobody gets down and says to that child, okay, you put your knee up like this and you move one forward and the other that. It's conscious. It's ingrained in them, and even learning how to talk. You can say "da da" and "mama," but the further they listen to whoever's talking, they start putting sentences and words together. Then number two, back a while back before I came on, and Mr. Williams and Anthony and James were talking about the Second Amendment, and Anthony made a comment about when they go in to purchase these guns and buying all this military stuff, isn't by anyone questioning what you're going to do with that. And I've always thought of that way back when. And so what I did,
Personal use.
what I did, I actually went back and read what the Second Amendment says. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And even way back, I said, well, okay, if you're going to buy that kind of stuff, you need to go to the military, take it to the military.
Yeah, but we didn't have those kind of guns then. When this Constitution and all that, those kind of guns didn't exist. And the Constitution, they didn't include us in it in the first place.
And even now today, when people talk about the First Amendment and the right to bear arms, they don't put all what that Second Amendment says and what it in the beginning meant to be. And again, it shows how we as a society and people have it's always going to screw things around to fit our own self-interest and things that we want to do.
Yeah. Well, Miss Sims, let me ask you this then. Can hate be rehabilitated?
Not being a doctor or whatever, but I've heard and kind of believe if you learn something, it can be unlearned based on your self-interest. If you want to unlearn something, if you don't want, if you're satisfied with what you how you're
I
operating out of, you won't even try, even think about changing your mind or listening to other things or
I
trying to
can
learn.
personally give y'all stories of where I know people have. I've dealt with white people that were racist at one point in time,
Mhm.
and over time they have come to grips with the fact that
Right.
they were wrong. And that happens a lot in prison. To give you an
Right.
example,
That,
because
that,
they're
that's
confined.
just where I was going to go with that.
Mhm.
Hmm.
When you start talking about prison,
Hmm.
because a lot of times, well, the way it is now, you're racially segregated, but
Yep.
you do, like you say, you do have access, and sometimes if you spend 20 or 2 or 3 decades with a man, you do learn that, hey, maybe, but when you speak of rehab, we see how it has failed prisons, the prison system. How is it easier for this idea to get across, Brother Williams, than the idea of coming back to society?
Well, see, I would think that goes right back into part of what critical race theory was attempting to address is the fact that we're dealing with a society that needs to heal from its point of
Yeah.
view and perspective of elitism and superiority. So the point is, I've never heard of a program that's a official program that addresses uh bringing somebody out of being a racist. That sound like a phenomenal idea for that to be government funded. That sounds like a nice program. I
Well,
never heard of
there's a
such
group
thing
of
and don't think
people
they
in New
abuse it.
Orleans. There's a group of people in New Orleans that they have a workshop undoing racism.
Oh, I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with the Undoing Racism workshop. I've actually attended that. That's
I have
nice.
too. I have
Yeah,
too.
and,
Yeah.
and they start that workshop off saying prejudice plus power equals racism. They
Yeah.
break down what it means. I remember that. I attended that
Yeah,
workshop.
I do
Oh,
too. That was quite a training. And see, but
yes.
this it permeates our society. Really, what happens
Right.
is people can flow in and out of this. There was just a thing with this baseball player in New York that made a comment about Tim Anderson in a reference to Jackie Robinson. And so he reflected on that Tim Anderson as that was a negative thing for him to say to me. Well, the other player, Josh Donaldson, he didn't get it. He didn't have any idea that this was something that he probably should not have said to his teammate. He was totally oblivious to what he got
Right.
fined and he got suspended. And he still to this day, he doesn't know what he did wrong.
Well, that's those are your different tiers of racism or privilege. So and that kind of goes into what I'm getting at. You're dealing with a society to where so much of it is subliminal. Even white people
Yeah.
that don't necessarily participate in direct racism find that they've been brought up in a racist culture. And so a lot of the actions that they do on a day-to-day basis that they wouldn't have considered to be racist acts are actually racist acts. And so again, we're dealing with a society and a culture that has to be completely undone. So when you're dealing with a child that has unfiltered access to hate speech, unfiltered access to all of this weird stuff that would justify racism and justify creating those type of barriers, again, that just creates another powder keg because on top of the fact that the children are not being monitored like they should and the content being controlled like they should, videos being what they are, because keep in mind, we're talking about an environment now that is way more realistic than what it was back when we were children. I mean, when I played uh, Space Invaders and you got a big cube that's blowing up another big cube, there's nothing about that's making you numb as a comparison to a game like Grand Theft Auto, to where the graphics are so real. They call what do they call ragdoll physics, And now you take that to the level to where they have the metaverse, and you have these, video games where you put a goggles on in this virtual reality, and the actual weapons that you hold within these virtual reality games operate like the real weapons.
Like the
You
real
can
thing.
learn, you can literally learn how to shoot an assault rifle on a video game with your hands, gestures, and everything. They even have vests that
take
you can put on
take
and
it
you
apart
feel
the
the
whole
kick.
9 yards.
Yes. And
Well,
they
what's the
look
purpose of that?
realistic.
What's the purpose of showing this to kids? What's the purpose of that? What's that
The
It's
supposed
called.
to
purpose,
do?
the
It's
purpose
called.
is capitalism. It's called
Yeah, making
making
money.
money. Nothing is off limits in a fascist society when it comes to making money. Remember, the United States will sell weapons, its artillery to its own enemies for to make a dollar. They ain't gonna obviously just sell the strategic weapons, but they will sell weapons to the enemy. I mean, so from that standpoint, nothing is off limits. And like I said, growing up in Texas, it was a gun culture. I literally remember, and this is before I was a Panther, that I would decide what outfit I'm gonna wear with my gun. I'm not joking when I say that, because we grew up in Texas in a gun culture. Mind you, I grew up in an environment to where the majority of my weapon choices were based upon hunting, because I grew up hunting and fishing. But nonetheless, Texas, the environment in Texas is a gun culture. So when I turned 18, it was not a thing that my parents discouraged me to do, to go out and buy my gun. That was like a rites of passage for me at 18. And so being black and doing that, and living in a household to where it was accepted, you know damn well white households go all out, and not only do they get like I got maybe a Mossberg 870, if y'all familiar with that. But you go to the average white household, they gonna get a Bushmaster AR-15 as a birthday present turning 18, with five 30 round high capacity magazines, and they gonna go take a trip to the gun range and shoot it. And one thing that we have to be mindful of, when you got video games that are teaching you violence, when you have an environment that teaches you how to shoot weapons to that degree, and the type of weapons that you're shooting are not the type of weapons that are meant to put down animals, but meant to put down people. And then when you go to the gun range, and that's the target you're shooting at are silhouettes of people, you are feeding what's referred to as a bloodlust. That bloodlust has to be fed. And at some point, I am going to have to be able to shoot a real live human target. This is the psychology that's going on and being ingrained in this generation. You see, so that's what we have to recognize, and that's where the mental illnesses comes in, because we're talking about an upbringing that not only nullifies you to violence, but actually prepares you for violence, actually grooms you for violence, actually puts you in the mindset of, by the time you're 18, you are ready to be a real life soldier, whether you sign up for the military or not.
but
So
but
you
brother
take that.
Williams,
Yes.
I mean, come on. I don't know a kid in my generation that didn't have the little toy soldiers and the cannons and
Ain't
all
the
of
same. I played with a GI Joe with a kung fu grip, but that GI Joe with the kung fu grip, you could not shoot in the head splatter and look like in everything look real. Everything be real like on these video games now. We talking 360 virtual reality video games. They're not cube. They're not the 8-bit cube stuff that we played with and dealt with growing up. This stuff is realistic now.
so
Yeah, but why kids
so
in Texas? What motivates this guy to go in and kill kids?
It's
See,
no, there
that's
was
the
no
thing. That's what
motivation. That no, see, this is what y'all missing. Y'all are using the wrong word. It is not a motivation. It is a lack of emotional maturity. If I am think of what young little kids do when they can't get their way. They yell, they whine, they start kicking. Y'all know that when a little child does that. Take that same behavior pattern and multiply that in somebody that is 18 years old. He shot his grandma. He shot his grandma based upon something that she refused to let him have. Okay, we're dealing with emotional immaturity. That's the mental illness sickness that I'm talking about. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that this society does not actually The parents are not encouraged to actually have the actual social interaction that they need to have. When you put a child in front of a screen and let them have a unfiltered content of anything, and that inundates them the way it does, and then all of a sudden you take that from them, they go ape shit crazy, and they don't know how to go out and play board games. They don't know how to go out in the woods and just shoot rocks and skip rocks over the lakes. You ask a 15-year-old child now, let's go, hey, let's go to the lake and go skip rocks. They gonna point both middle fingers at you and call you and curse you out.
Let
That's
alone
just
let alone play Scrabble. Is that no way in the hell they can
yeah. What, they don't even know what that is.
play?
So it's an entirely different perspective. And again, a lot of the video games are geared toward violence. So they're being taught these things, and again, you're not what's happening is the emotional maturity of the technology that we're using is not we're not able to keep up with the technological advancements that are taking that we're giving each other, at any age. Remember, technology is constantly evolving and advancing. And what's happening is the older generations are not aware of the impact of the technology that the younger generations are using.
or
And
they're
so that
denying
adds to
or
it.
they're denying the impact of
Yeah, denial.
what's
Yeah.
going. And what you're saying to me also falls under what we just discussed, learned and unlearned behavior, because that and children are constantly learning things from adults. Now, where do you think that 18-year-old learned what a manifesto is and how to prepare one and how
Right.
to write one? He's listened to it from someplace from an adult, and here again, technology, the opportunity to go online to see what one looks like. And then again, you and James were speaking about reality of some of the games, and also the media technology has advanced today through the years. The media is over in the war showing you what
Yeah.
happens to
I,
people in war
I've
and
had
how to shoot stuff.
But what
So
about
I
the
all
had
of
my
that
parents?
own
comes
experiences.
together.
I
What
had my
about the
own
parents?
experiences with
We
that when they
continue
start.
to eliminate the elephant in the room, which is the parents. And so we're
I know.
saying that
There
these
you
parents
go.
are just totally inequipped, that they're inequipped to control these kids when they get 9, 10, 11.
I'm
I
not
mean,
saying that.
this is what, you know,
Well,
it has to come
society
back
is.
down. The parents have to have a part in this, to what
They
their
do.
kids watch, to what their kids
They.
are doing, and they
You're
have
absolutely
to
right.
really be attentive to that. And I think that that's a whole cycle there that, parenting nowadays. I
Well,
try my
that
granddaughter.
again,
She knows how to do the
Anthony.
iPad, and she knows how to do all this stuff I don't even know how to do. She's
But
4.
let's look at this. Let's look at this from a holistic approach. The economy is making it more and more so, and I can definitely attest to this in California. To where, keep in mind, probably when you were young, you had the male figure went to work, and you had a mother there that was nurturing the children, always involved in a schoolwork, always involved in the rearing and bringing them up. Whereas as you get with the younger generations, you have both parents working, and now you have typically have a parent working 2 jobs, or have a full-time job and a part-time job. And with this technology, what it does is it kind of takes the role of parenting. And then, like in California, babysitting and stuff like that is crazy in terms of the being able to afford that. So what a lot of parents end up doing is they have their child stay at home and watch TV, and stay at home and deal with their electronics, and that helps them to what, go out and work more, and try to keep the bills going. We're living in a society that's geared toward dividing the household and getting everybody caught up in the time being so occupied with trying to keep up with the bills, trying to keep up with the finances, to where the children are literally being reared by the technology that they're using.
Does anybody? Am I the only one that recalls the term latchkey kids.
That's exactly what I was going to refer to. It started in the early 70s when children were coming home with the keys around their necks. Yes, that's exactly what I was going to
I was one
say,
of them
James
kids.
and Robert. And getting back to what Anthony was saying regarding the parents, in parents not acknowledging or blocking out what's going on. In the end, a lot of them end up fearing their own children.
Yeah.
And for valid reasons at times, because the children end up having don't even have second thoughts, as Robert's saying, in even doing harm to their own parents or loved one of the family.
And nowadays, what the child will turn around and tell you, I'm going to report you. I'm going to call the police on you.
Yeah.
And remember, we live with a society now that actually grooms and leans more toward the child being able to do that. Now, when I was growing up, you would get spankings by the principal. I would get spanking on my way home by my next door neighbors. I get a spanking on once I get home. Everybody had the right to what? Raise you. Everybody was accountable for your well-being in the neighborhood. I guarantee you, if someone tries to spank a child now in the neighborhood, you talking about a lawsuit, you talking about them getting put in jail and all kinds of stuff. Now, mind you, like I said, when I grew up, I could get a spanking by anybody on the street. You hear me? My mom, if anybody saw me doing something wrong, they were entitled to spank me.
And
that is not the environment we got now. Right. That is not the environment that the children, you see, so it's a difference. So parenting was more of a village mentality versus what it is now. You see, so it's a different time.
Anthony, no, parents do not get out of this in regards to the attitudes that they have or don't have. We are straight right in there at the forefront in regards to behaviors that we have taught intentionally or unintentionally to our youth, because as I said before, they don't come here sucking things like that out of their thumbs, and it doesn't fall down from the sky. I mean, what they're taking in.
But once they took away that, we're working in child protection, once they took away, it's been a continuum thing. Once they took away the parents' right to actually discipline their own children, to actually say, this is what goes on in this house. You're going to have to go to school. You're going to have to blah, 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 and set the riot act to them. You can't do that. I mean, I had many cases that would come in, just they hit the child. They said, well, there's a mark. And if there was a mark, they would go to court. Right. They would bring them into court, and they might even want to put this child in placement to make the parent do parenting. And I mean, it would just go on for something like this. I said, no, I would do this to my own kids coming up. They had to listen to us. But as you say, that has eroded over time. And now the whole child protection area, the kids have the power. And there's things that I would see. Yeah. Here's a kid that's 10 years old in court, no parent there. And this guy is telling him, okay, this is your rights. He doesn't understand this. This is a kid. He does not understand. But they put them in the system 10, 11, 12, where they're facing a judge and they're facing this process. And it's almost like they get used to it. It's almost like the kids, almost like this is part of it somehow, where it should be an anomaly. It should be something that you learn from that and you move on. But it's the system is allowing people to be caught up in this, and they've really taken the power away from parents.
Two things as spanking or things along those lines. When we were growing up, it was part of the kind of disciplining or something that we
part of the culture. It was part of the culture.
But then we as adults, some of the adults took it too far, where the discipline actually turned into abuse. Physical abusing the children,
because they're on drugs, they're using alcohol, they're not thinking.
And those of us that could tell the difference in what was going on at that time, we remained silent. We didn't become over just as outspoken about what was going on, and we let others take over in regards to expressing themselves, and we didn't disagree loudly, strong enough, and as a group of what was happening. And
I,
so
I
we are.
I would say that the problem that we're facing is when you allow too much government control to deal with situations that should be in the hands of the people. These are the kind of things you're going to end up with, especially as the population increases. See, a lot of times we have to recognize where we are. As you get a larger population, you get larger cases of this type of thing slipping through the cracks in these type of behaviors. Even going back to what I'm talking about the electronics. Keep in mind, we're dealing with an environment now, and you can look at where Elon Musk keeps talking about it, to where things are becoming more and more automated. As you deal with more and more automation, it also applies to the whole concept of parenting. It applies to the whole concept of child rearing, applies to the whole concept of how we learn things in these behaviors. And so we're dealing with more of an automated process. And so the ability and the control is being removed from the family structure and being integrated within a corporate world, in a corporate environment, in a government society. This is why Elon Musk is jumping on the whole thing about creating a what do you call it, a national income, to where, because the future is based upon being able to get robots to do the jobs of the average person, to the point to where there's not going to be an opportunity for the average person to be able to earn a living wage. So they're going to create some type of economic process to where you're going to automatically get money. And if you think it's bad now, wait it when it gets to the point to where society, the mass majority of people, don't have any attachment or any value in terms of what they present to the world.
See,
And so
this
then
is
they end up going to a virtual environment all together to live. So you
see,
think we lazy now? Shoot, y'all
but
ain't seen nothing.
Speaking of
this
the
this
public arena, I think a lot of people, parents, society in general don't realize the power and control that they have to override a lot of what the politicians are saying. But because they don't realize that power, and they see the politicians as all powerful and knowledgeable, they allow that to go on, and politicians take advantage of that. And a while
Yep.
back, James, you all were talking about the Strom Thurmond in regards to a lot of the racist stuff that he put out there in his latter years. You found out that he fathered a black child by
right.
shortage. Yeah,
Thomas, I mean, come on, I mean, Thomas Jefferson, how far you want to go back? I mean,
yeah.
but the thing, that I'm hearing most is that due to technology, we're always going to be behind the eight ball because people do not have that urge to educate themselves anymore. Like you
Yep.
said, and a good example of what you were talking about, Brother Williams, is the Lordstown plant in uh, Warren, Ohio. Ernie Shavers. I just thought I'd get that in there for you, Mr. Scott. Uh, but and when the plant first came in, it was an assembly line. People
Hmm.
doing different things.
Yeah.
One put in the windshield. One did this. One within 8 to 10 years, it became automated,
Hmm.
which led to a loss of jobs. And now you have is supervisors or skilled people at work. There
Yeah.
are no more labor jobs.
Hmm.
You know, and those were things that we called unskilled labor.
Right.
Not too much of that anymore.
Right.
I mean, and if you don't believe me, go to McDonald's. Go to McDonald's. Have you seen anybody cook a burger?
So they don't even cook
I,
burgers and McDonald's. I wouldn't know.
I, I mean, I don't even know if they put the sandwiches together anymore. When you see the
Yeah,
when you see the commercials here, Jack in the Box, everything is automated. One
yeah.
puts on the pickles, another one puts on the lettuce. How soon before those jobs become even more animated?
Yeah, and that's the course that society is taking, and a lot of that again also goes into the fact that when that happens, you have more and more of a gap of those that are in the know versus those that are not in the know, and so you end up building a society to where the mass majority of the people are just users. Users don't have to know anything about what's really going on. It's no different than and this is I use this example to the Panthers. I talk about understanding, understanding, and overstanding. Understanding is knowing how to drive a motor vehicle. Understanding is knowing how to repair a motor vehicle. Overstanding is knowing how to build one from scratch. Most of us are fine and dandy with just being able to understand. And we're building a society that is based on that. Understanders are the consumers of the world. Most people are happy with simply being the consumer because I'm just a user and I'm just taking, I'm just consuming. And mind you, when you do that, and we're talking about the type of technology toward telecommunications and social media and the internet of things are going, it is separating what we are able to visually and sensually recognize from reality because the interfaces that are coming up now, let's just look at what Elon Musk is doing with the Neuralink. The interfaces that are coming up now are going to be able to fully detach people from their actual sensory input and create false sensory inputs that will give you the exact same stimulation. And when you unplug like that, or should I say plug in like that, then again, we lose our ability to connect with one another as human beings. So everything that I'm connecting with at that point is automated in a computer program. And so from that standpoint, how can you expect your emotional body and your emotional intuition, your emotional intelligence, should I say, your emotional intelligence to be able to keep up with a real life unvirtual environment? It can't, because I can easily cut that game off, or I can easily hit reset, or I can easily, when I get killed, reboot, and come back in. In real life, there is no reset. In real life, there is no collecting bonuses and pass and go and getting a reward for the most kills and all this other stuff. That's not real life. So you're creating this gap between what's real and what isn't real, but yet the people are moving on the what's not real side. So when the majority of my time is spent in a non-real environment, when I have to make real life decisions that create frustrations, and I'm not able to reset, cut the game off, or put in a cheat code, then I don't know how to deal with my emotions. So that creates those outbursts that we see. Those creates those detachments from reality that we see. We're not recognizing the monsters that we are creating,
Right,
and
right,
then by the time it's done, we want to sit back and act like we don't know how it happened.
right. Old school at the time that I was coming up, and way back when with the computer, I went to school trained to be a data operator. It was always said, and we knew garbage in terms of the computer and technology, garbage in, garbage out. And so that computer will not and cannot do anything that a human has not programmed it to do. And really
That's
a
that's not
computer,
true anymore. They have
right, a
they
computer,
got artificial intelligence called deep mind. I urge all
right,
of y'all to look at it.
but it started out somewhere, somebody programming the computer how to think for itself, and
Yeah.
things along those lines.
A-
It has a history to it. And
AI, Miss Sims, check it out.
Yeah,
The,
we're past that now.
the car drives itself. The car can
Yeah,
back up, car can parallel
right,
park.
but it started out someplace in the
Right.
beginning. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it
yeah,
evolved. It
Beginning, it
yeah.
evolved, and
started
that's
out
just it.
someplace.
We as physical humans, we
Right.
are not evolving at the rate of the technology in which we're building. And that's what I'm getting at. And so emotionally, let's just talk about just genetics. Emotionally and physically and maturity wise, it still takes us 18 years old to become 18 years old.
Yep.
But the technology can double and triple what it was in the last 6 months.
Yep.
So
Technologies. Yep.
the human capacity to interact with the stuff that it is creating is getting to a point to where it's reaching the danger zone for the average user.
Right.
And that's what I'm
Technology is now
saying.
thinking for itself.
Right.
Yes.
Technology, we taught it to think for its how to think for itself and do for itself. And we bought into that, into allowing that to happen, as you're saying, Robert. And we're going to pay we are paying the consequences of it. And
Yeah.
we'll continue to until we start thinking differently and doing differently about what's going on and who and what we're allowed to control our lives.
You know, the auto industry is a real kind of a buffer for a lot of these things. I mean, as James was saying in Warren, Great Warren, Ohio, here in St. Paul, they had a Ford plant. And they build trucks. They build almost all the trucks, the little trucks that they used to have, those little Ford trucks. They built almost all of those. They had a train that would come in right there. And then they had the Mississippi River with the barges right there. And a lot of my friends worked there until they retired. It was, they could get a car. It wasn't easy work, but they could work there until they retire. Right now, that Ford plant is gone. Okay, it's demolished. It doesn't exist anymore. And they're building these exclusive houses on that land, exclusive houses on this little island where this whole Ford had their own insurance company, John Hancock. That's their insurance because they own John Hancock Insurance. So they covered all of their stuff. Then they had the office right there. It was one of the hugest complexes of Ford, and it's gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. I don't even know where they probably make it overseas now.
I was gonna say that's exactly what they do, because now they're being automated. Whatever little workers you do have, you can pay them the cents on the dollar. So when the NAFTA free trade agreement came in, that's when all that stuff happened. And I remember that thoroughly because I was a part of it. I used to work for a cell phone manufacturer, and as soon as NAFTA got signed, they shut down the plants that when we were building, and they moved them to Mexico.
See, yeah. Miss Sims.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, always glad to have you join us. So let's see how we're going to do this. Why don't you give us your final thoughts first, and then Mr. Scott and Brother Williams, you can take us home.
Okay, I'll leave you people with this in regards to one of the positive things I hope is coming out of whatever's going on around us, that people are becoming more aware of, and that maybe others are informing them how crucial politics and voting is, and put it on the level of realizing that even though the parties can raise billions of dollars, etc., it gets back to who actually physically goes to the polls and vote. And a lot of that gets lost into us as a society, listening to the politicians and what they're saying and not realizing how much power we have as a people. And one of the examples is how people that realize the power of voting and the power control it has are constantly putting up obstacles to people not to vote. Just like in Georgia, where they're not allowing Mr. King to give water to people in line. Somebody should be saying, or maybe it's already out there, talking among themselves. Okay, let's put a backpack on and put our own bottles of water in it so we can drink our water as we stand in line. And that way we won't be endangering other people from getting arrested and things like that. And I just hope the people are starting to realizing the power of the vote and the power that they have in voting. Right now I'm getting all kind of messages from the governor and people that are running asking for funds. And I always send right back to them, you haven't told me what you're using the funds for. I know what it, basically what they're in, but I always send back the same message. And it says to me they aren't reading that message or excluding it because they keep asking for money. So that's one way of informing people or sharing information with people. The end.
uh, Mr. Scott.
Well, I hope at some point that this thing here in this United States, we can revert to some type of common sense. I mean, that we have to be able to say things like our schools should be safe places. We should be able to go out to have a picnic somewhere. We should be able to have a safe environment that we live in. And I just, all this redistricting, all this jerry rigging that they're doing with votes, all these things just so that they can get in. The politicians are just telling you things just so you vote for them. They don't do it. Like Jacob Fry said, well, there'll be no knock warrants. Well, that went by the wayside. And now he says he's going to do it again. Oh, yeah, I really mean it this time. So I'm hoping that we can somehow wake up behind all this negative stuff that we've seen and get back to common sense. Common sense, it's about the family structure is it's different now, but that doesn't mean it can't exist. It's just different now. And so we have to be able to adjust to this new world. And I hope we can keep talking about these things and hope having discussions about it and hearing from the different parts of the country, because these shootings are not just happening here. This crime is not just happening in Minneapolis; it's happening all over this country, and it's an escalation that they're pitting us continually against ourselves, and then they're hiding behind mental health and which is still the old white supremacy game. I mean, there's some people are mentally ill and some aren't. Some people, that wasn't his fault. That wasn't their fault. I mean, so I'm just hoping we can get to a point soon here of common sense. And maybe with this new election cycle, get this 45 thing out of the stench out of our country. Maybe they can wake up a little bit. Oh, and by the way, James, Thursday I'm going to see the Yankees. I'm going to see the
Okay.
judge. I'll be sitting
Okay.
on right field, see the judge. Yeah.
Oh, well, make sure you carry your glove with you because you know he's going to be bringing in. Brother Williams, yeah, before you go on your final thought, I am still wondering uh, about our law enforcement. People have constantly got on me about police reform, but how do I know, especially now that this has been brought to light? You tended to before this talk about putting the police on the pedestal. The police were our law enforcement, the last boundary between us and this unlawful society that we belong to. But I've never known courage to come in the form of a badge. But maybe that's just me. Go ahead, go ahead, Brother Williams.
Well, I would just say in that situation, let's just go back to what I call the warfare tactics, especially as applies to media, and just know that they're going to rely on another situation that's going to take the interest of the people away from that, and then they'll be able to try to drown it out as an isolated incident in terms of what happened with those police, and I'm pretty sure something here is going to happen sometime soon that's going to dwarf that, just like how that took all the attention away from the Buffalo situation. Not to say that we're dealing with two tragedies, period, and there's plenty of tragedies, but nonetheless one story ended up suppressing another story and sweeping that one under the rug for the most part. uh Media will always play that game, but I would say what we have to recognize, especially us as Black people, the bottom line is we need to be in the mentality of, first and foremost, knowing that we are at war. I say this all the time. When
All
you
the
know
time.
that you're at war, then you recognize that you're on the battlefield. And if you recognize you're on the battlefield, you know that that means you're a target. And if I know that I'm a target, then I am going to secure myself in a position knowing that someone is going to come out and attack me. Therefore, now I have to think on my feet. Therefore, now I have to be strategic, and therefore now I have to be tactfully thought driven as I deal with my day to day life, which goes back to self determination. As a people, we have to think self determination. We're dealing still with the ill effects of slavery, which puts us in the mentality of being domesticated beings. Let's just call it what it is. When you deal with black folks that are domesticated, that have been uh that don't know their way of life, don't know their true religion, don't know their true native tongue, don't know their true essence, and do not have a rites of passage that they take their children through anymore, do not have a community that actually raises the parents that are able to raise the children. All of these things have been stripped from us. That means in order for us to come back around to a position of having power, people power, like the Panthers say, all power to the people, we need to be a self-determined people. First and foremost, to be self-determined, you need to be able to accept the accountability of knowing that you have to save yourself. That means that I'm not looking for the police to save me. That means I'm not looking to blame somebody else. That means I have to be able to take full responsibility and accountability of what is happening within my environment. That's self sufficiency. By doing that, that will raise the bar in terms of what type of things I feed and put into my mind, what type of expectations I have out of life, because I am going to be the holder and accountable for my well being, for the path that my people are taking, and so on and so forth. So we have to be willing to stand up as a people, as a full human being. Mind you, they labeled us three-fifths of a human, and we've accepted that. We may not mentally, or it may not come out of our mouth, and we say, "Oh, I'm not three-fifths of a human being. I'm a full human being." But now we're operating as a victim from the position of entitlement. We feel as a victim we are entitled to be treated as a human being, but ain't got the audacity to operate like we should and hold ourselves accountable to the level of being a human being. So I'm saying that we as a people must think self-determination. And once we do that, we will collectively come back together, and we will collectively be in a position to where we can address the politics that Sims is talking about, to where we know the power that we have. And instead of just voting, what we'll be doing is we'll be putting our people in positions of power. But see, that has to do with us rebuilding and having intact communities again. But that's accountability. So, what the people need to get out of this is that we cannot continue to allow ourselves to be dramatized by the conditions and by the things that are going on, because all of this stuff is are symptoms of what happens to a people and a society as it erodes. The larger the population, the more eroding we're going to see. The more government input and more government control is going to happen. The larger the population, the more control you have to have over a population, because it is larger. The larger the population, the more dumbed down that population has to be, because there's a larger population. We're not putting the dots together and seeing this for what it is. And so, as long as that is happening, we are in trouble. So, people, wake up and let's do what we need to do. All power to the people. That's how I have to end that.
All
Wow.
power to the
Yes,
people. I'll
Steve.
see everyone next
Yes,
week.
Steve.
Have a great week,
Mr.
everyone.
Scott didn't say anything.
Mr. Scott,
Yeah,
I thought we got Mr. Scott
you
before we got.
did. Yeah, I said my piece.
Okay.
Yeah, you
I
all
thought it
like,
started out with me. Okay, all
yeah,
right.
no,
All
you
right.
sounded like
What
my
about you,
Hey,
grandmother when
James?
I
What
had
about
to
you,
do
James?
my piece in church, and she gave me this long piece, and she got so frustrated. Finally, she said, "I got something I know you can do." I said, "Well, what is it?" Jesus wept.
Okay, James, you next. You have to say something. You always need to say something with us.
I said mine before Mr. Williams. See?
No, 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 no. The
I'll
last
say I'll say mine again. Jesus
I'm
wept.
on to that. I'm on to that.
No, I was my thoughts were is that simply when I call the police, or if as Brother Williams said, you expect them to come and clean up, but I've never seen any police department that could issue courage along with that badge. And those were my final thoughts. But I enjoyed talking with everyone tonight. Always a pleasure, Mr. Scott. Uh, see you.
Talk to you.
Well, you'll be at the game, so I won't see you Thursday. But everyone else, hope to see you
Peace and
next
love.
Monday.
Till the next
Yep.
time. Bye bye.
All
Good
right,
night,
y'all.
folks. Good
All right.
night.